What's going on, y'all? I'm Brady, and welcome to Brady's Book Nook. So today, we are tackling a recent read that has quickly ascended into one of the top spots in my favorite books of all time. I adore this book, and that is McCarthy's No Country for Old Men. So, kind of a little preview before we get into this book. So, at the end of last year, I think it was maybe November, October, I read a book by Cormac McCarthy called Blood Meridian, and I didn't know how I felt about it. So I kind of thought about it for a couple months, and it just kept sticking with me, and I couldn't get it out of my head. It was something that I constantly thought about, and it was recurring, and I couldn't understand why. So I really just dived into it and thought about it, and I had a lot to say, and there's a lot I left unsaid, and I actually made a video about it that has been my best performing video on the channel. So, like I said, there's something about him and the way he tells stories that just really interested me. So I decided I was going to check out some of his other work because I couldn't help but get this man's writing out of my head. So I indulged myself, and I bought two of his other works, No Country for Old Men and The Road. And I had heard that he does this weird thing. He doesn't normally write sequential books like series and sequels, but he does this thing where he has thematic sequels. So the end of one book leads into another. And so No Country for Old Men is a precursor to The Road. Not story-wise at all. They're not linked in any way, but kind of thematically. So that is kind of where I was at. So I decided to start with this book. And let me tell you, like I said, it's quickly becoming one of my favorite books of all time. And I absolutely adore this book. There's a lot to think about and a lot to talk about. And we're going to get into it in just a second. But before we get into it, I want to go ahead and say that this is going to be me talking about a lot of the things that I've noticed in this book, a lot of the meaning that I derive from it, and just the themes and stuff. So I'm going to talk about a lot of spoilers, and I'm going to probably ruin a lot of this book for would-be readers. So this is something that I would extremely recommend you going and reading first. But if not, if you don't think this is something you're really wanting to try to tackle and get into, watch this video and then go read it. Or do I watch the movie? Because I've heard the movie's excellent. I've yet to watch it, but it's something I'm going to be doing very soon. So, kind of do with that what you will before I get too much into it. So, this is the story of a man named Llewellyn Moss, who is kind of just this upstanding citizen, kind of just a good guy who is out hunting, and he finds this drug deal gone wrong. This cartel deal, and when he's there, he finds a suitcase with $2.3 million in it. And as he's looking around, kind of scoping the situation out, seeing what's happened, seeing what's going on, he finds a man who is not dead, and he's asking for water. So Llewellyn runs away and leaves, and the story could end there. But because he's a good man, he has a good conscience, he decides to go back and get this man some water. And when he's there, the people who were looking for this deal come looking for it, they find him, and he's on the run. So that's general premise, general plot, that's what we're following. So you have this pillar, who's probably the one driving the plot forward, I would say, is Llewellyn at this moment. And you have two other characters who are pillars of thought and pillars of meaning in this book. You have Anton Chigurh, who is this machine-like, robotic type of killing machine, who is hired to get this money by someone. So he is coming looking for the money, and he's one of the people who finds Llewellyn there. So you have him. And then you have Sheriff Bell, who is just the sheriff of the town that this all goes down in. And he is trying to figure it out. And he's got his own stuff. And Sheriff Bell is our main character. At the beginning of each chapter, he has this these monologues where he talks about what's going on in the world, talks about the past, talks about how he sees things, and you kind of get to know him the best throughout the course of the book. And Anton Chigurh is this like enigmatic, strange character who plays a lot more into thematic purpose. So those are base level right there. Those are your three people who kind of go throughout the book. And like I said, this book dwells into a lot of things. It dwells into narcotics dealings in the southwest of the U.S. and kind of just how regular civilians interact with that. But the majority of this book is Llewellyn on the run from Anton Chigurh and the Mexican cartel, and Bell following the path of carnage that they leave in their wake. So like I said, I would say that there's 4 big themes in this that I'm kind of going to go into and talk about and reveal a lot of the plot as we go. So random violence is this massive portion of the book. So Chigurh is a killing machine. The book starts out with him being arrested, and then he kills the officer and escapes, solely to see if he can do it. And that's the only reason why he does it. So he kills at random, and a lot throughout the book, he will just kill random people for any reason. And the cartel is the same way. They kill people regardless of their intention, regardless of what happens, regardless of what's going on. That's what happens. And that's a massive part. And Chigurh and like this random violence is all based around greed, because it's all about the money. It's all about them trying to get this money, and everyone's trying to pull this money each way. So this random violence and greed go hand in hand, and it's just more of human nature and how everyone's trying to do something. And all the time, it's throughout the book, it's so well nuanced. This idea of random violence and greed kind of conglomerating. Like, there's so many different things. But like I said, throughout the book, Chigurh is just randomly killing, and you have the cartel who's chasing and is just killing anyone who gets in the way. And Llewellyn is fighting back, and Sheriff Bell is talking about all these random acts of violence that he's seen over the years as sheriff. And throughout the book, you have these instances where Llewellyn has all this money, he's trying to do good, and even when he's trying to do good and get away, and he's giving this money to people and trying to get their help, they're demanding more. And it even happens to Chigurh later in the book. So one instance, Llewellyn narrowly escapes Chigurh and the cartel, and he asks these boys for their coat, I believe it is. So he pays them like $100 for the coat, and then they have beer, and he asks them for the beer too, and then they ask for more money, and just little things like that. It's all about people trying to get more, trying to just this greediness of man, and just this constant desire to grab and latch on and run the well dry. And even so, there's another character, Carson, who is this man who is hired to take down Chigurh. And at certain points in the book, or there's a scene in the book where Carson is meeting Chigurh, and he knows Chigurh is going to kill him. So Carson tries to kind of talk him out of it, and he tries to talk him out of it with money. But Chigurh, being one of our 3 main characters, is not affected by greed in the same way. He has a different story to tell. So Carson Wells is trying to say, like, I'm a day trader. Like, I'll give you this 14 grand right now to walk away. No one has to get hurt. But Chigurh's not motivated by money. He doesn't care about it. So he kills him. And that was just how it goes. And that's just his tenet of the way things are. So you have the rest of the world, besides our 3 characters, are really motivated by greed. And that's how they operate. And that's how most things are. And like I said, I was talking, Chigurh has a scene where he interacts with greed in a very specific way. So later in the book, Chigurh is killed, or Chigurh is in a car wreck. And he hops out, and he's got a compound fracture on his arm. And he runs into these kids and he tells them to give him a shirt, and then he hands them $100, and the kid takes it off and he gives them that. And as Shakur's walking away, these kids are arguing. These two little boys are like arguing over how they're going to split the money, because the one's saying he's not out of shirt, and the other one's saying, well, he's paying me too to not say anything about him being here. And just, there's all these little interactions that you can see the rest of the world is motivated by greed and these random acts of violence and desire to get more. And that people's intentions really don't mean anything. So the next big thing I would say is that there's this theme of people being misrepresented and that intentions mean nothing. So I will say that, so Llewellyn is this good guy. He's our prototypical hero. He's the one we want to root for. He's the one we want to see do well. But as the story goes on, you see that the story starts with him getting away with something. But he gets away with this act of taking this money, and there's no consequence. But when he goes back to give that dying man water, that's when the things come. So even though his intention is good, that means nothing to the world. His intention did not matter, and he had to deal with those consequences. And like I said, another massive spoiler, Llewellyn is killed. Our main character is killed in the middle of the story. He gets shot in a shootout with cartel. And you don't see it happen. It's not like it's telling the story and that happens. Sheriff Bell discovers this because they hear about it. And that's how it happens. He dies, I guess you would say, off page. Like, it doesn't show his death. It's not this big piece, even though it should be. So he's killed, and he is killed when he's talking to this girl, this young runaway. So there's this big misrepresentation that Llewellyn was running, even though Llewellyn's intention was to run away with keep his wife safe and send her away and then try to escape and then get back to her. It looks like he's running away with this young underage girl with all this money. And just this idea of like, that's what it looks like to people. That's what it looks like in the papers. And that's what people see, even though that was never his intention. Our hero has this bad rap in his death, even though he's trying to do the right thing throughout the book. And then another big one, so our main character, Sheriff Bell, is a war hero. He has a bronze medal. He came back. He's kind of like a hometown hero in that regard. But it's not exactly true. People see him as this hero, but he struggles with it because he knows that that's not true. He got this thing for narrowly escaping this bad situation in Vietnam where they're holding down a position and it didn't go well. They got bombarded and attacked, and he escaped because he left his men there to die. He ran away when, instead of trying to stay and fight and die defending the position, he left his men for dead and ran away and escaped. And he got this medal, this big prestigious piece of honor from that. And that's all people know. And he's the only one who knows the true story. But he tells the person who's given him the award before, he says he doesn't want to accept it, and he tells him why. He tells him that he can never tell anyone about this, except later in the book he reveals this to someone else. So there's this idea of what we see in people and what we know about people is not always true. And that's just, there's more below the surface, and we can't. And it's kind of that idea, the highway to hell is paved with good intention. So these representations that we see is not always really what's going on. And lastly, or I should say the third big concept is that we live in a world that is full of entropy and chance and just randomness. We don't know what's going to happen, and that life's not fair. And Chigurh that is the tenet in which he bases his entire thing off of. And there's this interaction between Carson Wells and Llewellyn when he's in the hospital about him getting about Chigurh, because Wells knows Chigurh, or Carson Wells knows Chigurh. And so Wells is telling Llewellyn that you need to just give this up, that he has this warped sense of values that he follows, and that it's not going to end well, like this guy, because you're not going to kill him, and he's not someone who's going to forgive. Even if you just give the money up, he's going to kill you for inconveniencing him. So Chigurh follows this thing of life being chance and kind of this unfair world that we live in. And there's 2 instances throughout the book that he's following this thing. As Chigurh's following Llewellyn, he stops at a gas station, and he has this interaction with the clerk at the gas station. He tells him, and they're talking and stuff, and he's just asking him all these strange questions. And the guy's trying to get him to leave because he knows this is not a good man. And he pulls a coin out, and he asks him what the most he's ever lost in a coin toss is, and he's like, "What do you mean?" And so he makes him call a coin flip for his life, because as far as Chigurh is concerned, it doesn't matter if this man lives or dies. It's just random chance. So he makes him flip the coin, and the guy calls it correctly, and Chigurh, being a man of his word and a man of the world that we live in, abides by the laws of probability and lets him live. But later in the book, Chigurh tells Llewellyn that he is going to kill his wife because he wouldn't leave this be. So Chigurh, being a man of his word, after Llewellyn is dead, tracks his wife down, and she comes in one day, and he's sitting in the chair waiting for her. And when he's there, she is having this conversation, talking about how they don't have to do this, but he says that he was a man of his word, and she's talking about him being dead, and he said, "It doesn't really matter that he's dead. I'm alive, and so is my word." So he has to keep it, because he has this warped sense of value. He has this idea of the world at large being random and chance and following through, and that's what he has to do. So he makes her call the coin, and it doesn't go well in her favor, and he kills her. And like I said, as he's on his way out, he's driving away. The bad guy seems to have won, and then he's in a T-bone, and he's horribly injured, and kind of just walks off. So there's this idea of just randomness. Like I said, the idea that our main character is killed off camera or off page, we don't get to see that. It's random. These were just random acts of violence. Even the idea of him stumbling across all this money just as he's out hunting is just random chance, and how the world is kind of pushed along by these random events that for some reason happen. All right, and now fourth, this is I would say the biggest theme in the book personally, is about, and it's the title, that it's the idea of this is no country for old men. And really what that's saying is, throughout the book, like I said, at the beginning of each chapter, Sheriff Bell talks about the world and how horrible it is, and what we're just seeing the world go down and down and down, and the world's getting more and more damned. And it's this whole idea of looking back on the past and thinking of it more fondly than it really was, because these things have always been. And kind of just bouncing off another Cormac McCarthy work, we talked, if you see my video on Blood Meridian, that man has a warring nature, and that this has always been here and will always be the ultimate practice for the ultimate practitioner. So man has this just tendency for violence and tendency to war and fight and just clash. So these things have always been around, but when we look back on the past, we think the times were better. We remember them more fondly than they ever were. And this is something that Bell has a problem with. He sees this world that's changing, and he sees it getting more different, and he's afraid. He doesn't like it. He's terrified by it, honestly. He can't stand it. But as he goes more and more, he just kind of sees the world go further and further down, and sees all this violence and stuff. And he starts to think that just this isn't a country for old men. Like, this people who lived in the past are still stuck there, and that they can't return to the past because it's too far gone. And he's afraid of the world that he lives in, and he doesn't like it. But all he can do is fear for it and try to run away from it and try to hold on to the past with all he has and hold on to the fonder times and look back on that. And so I would say that's the primary theme of the book, is him watching the world burn and knowing that there's nothing he can do about it. And at the end of the book, he talks about this dream. He remembers all these fond things about his father, and he talks about how throughout, after his father died, he had 2 dreams about him. And the one was him carrying a torch, and he passes by and they talk. And his idea is that he is this torchbearer. He is someone who is trying to siphon through the darkness of this new world, this changed world, this more vile, more evil world. And he's a torchbearer. He's trying to carry the light. He's trying to be the one to move on and kind of keep goodness alive, to keep this old hospitality, these old ways. He's trying to keep them alive, and just the goodness of man. And even in this dark world, he's trying to keep this sliver of light alive, even though he's terrified of the new darkness. And like I said, that final theme of carrying the light, carrying the torch, being the bearer of the fire, is what leads into the entire theme of The Road, which is incredible. So I feel like I've gushed enough over this book. I could go on and on and on. This is, when I think about, like I said, in my last video, I talked a little bit about ratings and stuff. When I think of a 5-star book, this is what I mean. A book that I can just sit and talk about and talk about and talk about it. And I feel, like I said, this video is getting very long, a lot longer than I had hoped. But it's still something I feel like I could just keep talking about. And something that I will reread and I will return to, and I will dissect and keep dissecting for probably as long as I live. And we'll just keep getting more and more out of it. And that's really the type of books I feel like people should be looking for in their life. If this video has interested you at all, or if it hasn't, read this book and come up with your own opinion. Think about what I've said here. Think about whether you agree or disagree with some of the themes. Think about what I've kind of given you and see what you think. It's a book I recommend everyone read. I really do. Not everyone's going to like it, and that's all right. That's something I know, something I accept. This is not the type of book that a lot of people like reading, because it's all below the surface, and you gotta dig, you gotta work, you gotta siphon through to try to read it. And it's not for everyone, but it's a book everyone needs to read. And I hope that everyone enjoys it and gets as much out of it as I did, because this is his masterpiece. I've read 2 of his books. I shouldn't say that. I've read 3 of his books, actually, because I have finished The Road. But as far as I'm concerned, this is a masterpiece. And maybe that'll change as I read more of his works and I reread some of his other things. Like, I'm going to give Blood Meridian another shot now that I feel like I'm more well-versed in how to read his style of prose, because it's kind of off-putting at times. If you're new to it, I like it now that I'm kind of read a few of his works and used to it. I really enjoy the way he writes. But like I said, that's definitely something that I think everyone should check out. And I hope that you've enjoyed this video. And if you've watched it to the end, thank you for watching. And if you turned it off in the middle of the video, thank you for watching. It may not be for you, but I appreciate any of you out there taking the time to stop and just listen to me ramble about something that I'm so passionate about. Thank you for watching. And that's all I got for you guys. But until next time, stay reading, y'all.